This week has been the start of the total renovation of the roof, and with 4 of the building team on site for 5 days, there have already been some pretty big changes. But the weather forecast 7 days ago was for storms and a lot of rain. So I was a bit nervous before we even started, and I've had 1 or 2 nervous moments this week. But on the first morning, although it was still pretty dark when I arrived, the rain had thankfully stayed away. And after opening up the house, I had a bit of a wait while the building team were loading up equipment from their base down the hill. But they were soon on site, and I was happy to welcome back Miguel, Hagi, Semi, and Fodo. Especially Semi, who had had a bit of a health scare since the last time that I saw him. I gave the team a quick explanation of the work. And then with Enric the boss on site, there was some unloading and testing the best position and angle for using the truck's crane during the work. They then checked the options for getting equipment indoors and upstairs. And I collected some chairs that had been in the shed for the team to use during their work breaks. Here's a short initial explanation of the overall roof project and the focus for this week. The overall project is the complete renovation of the whole roof, but we will be doing it in 2 phases, starting with one half of the roof and then the other. I'll explain the reasons for the work and the exact changes as the work progresses, but to start with, the work is all about the removal of the existing roof layers, which is 4 or 5 layers depending on how you look at the top layer of tiles. And then from the top down, the first layer are the ceramic Arab tiles that face downwards, and then the layer underneath them are the same Arab tiles, but this time facing upwards. And then all these curved tiles rest upon a layer below made up of this type of tile that is just about level. And then all of these tiles rest upon a whole series of narrow wooden pieces which the locals call yatas, and that I think we would probably call purlins. And all of these layers then rest upon a series of big wooden beams that rest upon the stone walls around the edge. And for this first week, the plan is to get a lot of scaffolding inside, and then for the team to remove all of the tiles and all of the purlins, and then to remove a few of the beams in line with one section of one wall where we're going to be doing some work that I'll explain later, so that by the end of this first week there should just be a series of beams left on top that we will be removing next week. After their break, the team then got on to unloading all of the scaffolding from the truck for setting up indoors under the roof that they will be working on. To start with, I wanted to get out of their way, but follow what was going on. And to keep busy, I started work sorting out rocks in this pile, organizing them according to size and how I thought they might be used. And with all the scaffolding inside, the team set it up under the walls that the beams rested on. and Haggy opened up a first hole to enable access to the roof. He then worked on the roof above while the others put more scaffolding up. And I went back to more rock organizing outside. Moving on to the top of the pile, where I wanted to do some more work later on. After Haggy's initial work, the team tested out their process for bringing tiles down off the roof. The plan is to reuse as many of the curved Arabic tiles as possible, so we want to take them off carefully and stack up as many as possible. But any that break or are already broken, we are simply throwing off the roof. And after Haggy's initial work, the hole was now big enough for the others to start working from above. And while the team removed more tiles, I did some more rock moving. Before they finished for the day, having made a very good start, getting set up, removing tiles and stacking them up, either on the ground outside or on the roof and ready for moving. The next day was an early start and I needed to open up more of the house to get more light in. Although in the actual work area there was plenty of light as the team quickly removed more tiles. While Enric was on site checking progress and confirming certain aspects, I started the first of many tidying up sessions that I was to do this week. During the mid-morning break, the team confirmed there was now enough space on top for me to take a look. So after the break, I followed them up. And then I left them again to get on with it, and I returned to the rock pile, where I wanted to create more space and a better path to the front. I also wanted to do some exercise while still being able to follow the team's progress and not getting in their way. At lunchtime, I chose a spot that I could sit and follow the team's fast progress. With the tiles stacking up above, the team needed to lift a lot of them down, including the flat tiles from the third layer down, which won't be going back onto the roof, but will be used where possible. While the team moved back to removing the tiles for the last part of their day, I started to smash up the broken tiles below to make them easier to walk on. And I'll actually be keeping most of this rubble in place as part of the new layers for the front terrace. And after some final smashing up, I also left for the day. The next day started with another early and dark morning. And while the team got back onto the roof, I smashed up the rubble that had been under the truck. And then while they worked in one area, I started more clearing in the areas where they had already removed the tiles. There was then another big session with the crane and bringing more tiles down. Although, as you will see in a minute, we were leaving some tiles on parts of the roof that we won't be removing in this phase, so that we don't have to bring the tiles down, only to lift them back up later on. The team then carried on with their work. I continued with cleaning up, and Enric was back for his daily check-in. And then after the break, it was more of the same for me and the team. In the middle of the day, I had to head off site for a meeting and some phone calls. But when I was back, I checked on progress, and the team had now removed nearly all of the tiles and was starting to remove some of the purlins in the next layer down. And with the purlins also being thrown off the top, my next task was now to move them out of the way to where they could be more easily collected later on. And then with the team finishing for the day, I was back upstairs to finish removing the wood and the tile rubble. On the fourth day, there was a bit less mist, a bit more light, and a better sunrise. And after some initial clearing of the purlins, the team unloaded more scaffolding and props, which were going to be needed for the work on a section on one of the walls that I mentioned earlier. To start with, they needed to put some precautionary props in place on the ground floor vault ceiling. And then under the beams that rest on this wall section, but won't be removed until phase 2. While they put these in place, I got on with some emails and then rubble breaking. And then a quick chat with Rex, who was kindly back on site for the morning and helping to clear more space with some grass cutting. Back inside, with the props now in place, the team started work to remove the beams from this part of the wall. And once the 5 beams in this section were free from the stones around them, the team could lift them out with the crane. After the first 2 beams were out, we all took a mid-morning break before all heading back to work, Rex with his grass cutting, and the team back to the beams and the crane. And with the 5 beams lifted out, the team could get to work on the actual wall below. All this is being done because there is going to be a steel beam inserted on this section, which I will explain more in next week's video. But for now, the team were removing the top layers of stones from this part of the wall. And they now also put in more props to fully support the beams on the other side of the wall, and a couple more props down below. After a quick rubble tidy up, I was back upstairs to help with the purlins, which the team were now removing from the remaining areas, and for which Semi had the laborious task of removing all of the old nails so that the wood could be moved and potentially used more easily. And having cleared the last purlins, the team returned to some final work for the day on the walls. And once they had left, I followed shortly after for a meeting with an insulation company. On the last day of the week, the cloud and mist were back. And the team arrived with a truckload of scaffolding that they are going to be using next week on the outside. So their first task was to unload and stack the equipment, and then they were back inside and working on the walls, either removing stones around the remaining beams to be taken out, or clearing all of the stones from the top of the wall where the steel beam will go. And with the team busy on this, I worked on an experiment for how I could use the longer purlins that were in better condition. And my initial thoughts were that they could indeed be useful for checking height measurements between the different terrace levels. The team were now putting some bricks and mortar on the steel beam wall. And Enric was back to review the work on this wall. Before the team's mid-morning break. After the break, the team were back on the wall. I returned to some rock clearing on top of the pile. And Photo loaded all of the purlins onto the truck for taking off site. On the wall work, two of the team worked on loosening the remaining beams, and Haggy started prep work on one wall for where a section of the ring beam will go. After a meeting with a technical expert from the insulation company I'd met earlier in the week, I finished my rock clearing and then took a late lunch. Before checking in on the team's final work for the week. And that is the end of work for this week, which started with a whole lot of scaffolding going inside, and now we've got a whole lot more scaffolding for going on the outside next week. And in this area, the pile of rubble has grown quite considerably after a lot was thrown out of the window up there. And even more wood and rubble has been dropped onto this side here. Although all the wood has now gone and the rubble in this space has been slightly more leveled out after being dropped out of the opening above, which has been used for bringing materials and equipment in, as well as throwing the rubble out. And all the tiles and purlins from this area have now been removed, just as they have from the whole of this main area, where the beams at this end have also all been taken out, and work on all of the walls has now been started, especially in this corner where we're now ready to put the new steel beams early next week. So this whole space does now look totally different, and next week there'll be plenty more changes as well. So please do tune in again to see how we get on.